the Biden administration has essentially admitted that that $6 billion, excuse me, actually would benefit the Iranian terrorist regime in a way that would harm our national security and potentially support terrorists. I know Iran has been behind this. I know Qatar has been a key funder of Hamas. I know the United States has sent money to the region in a way that almost surely benefited Hamas and the Palestinians on the other end there in the West Bank that are also a terrorist entity. What's interesting is the Biden administration has spent the last few years as part of this anti-Israel agenda appeasing Iran. And what's been particularly outrageous is they authorized, essentially they got out of the way and told the international banking community that $6 billion that the Iranians supposedly would be able to access, or should in theory have had access to, they'd be allowed to have access to only for humanitarian purposes. So they get a $6 billion injection in the side of their arm, and they tell us it has nothing to do with their ability to fund terrorism and Hamas. And of course, any sensible person sees that even if you pretend to limit it to humanitarian operations in Iran, that frees up money for other things, or surely allows them to spend money in a way they don't have to worry about in terms of, well, that's $6 billion we don't have to spend on humanitarian issues here in Iran. We can move that money around, or even if the money hasn't technically even been spent, if you've got big money coming in, people spend the money already in anticipation. So outrageously, the Biden administration spent days, by the way, they made that money available as part of a ransom payment or scheme in exchange for the release of American hostages that Iran had taken. So they were basically ransoming these hostages by making all this money available to the Iranian regime for, quote, humanitarian purposes. And to be managed, don't worry, they said the U.S. would manage how all that money was spent, and Qatar would manage it. And Qatar is a front and an ally of Iran and a supporter of Hamas as well. So they spent days trying to pretend what they did wasn't the reality of supporting Iran, the terrorist regime. And in fact, you had White House officials trying to get people censored for criticizing it. But even Democrats were upset with what was going on, and they ended up having to reverse course. So the Biden administration has essentially admitted that that $6 billion, excuse me, actually would benefit the Iranian terrorist regime in a way that would harm our national security and potentially support terrorists, after days of telling us otherwise. And if I were Congress, I would expand the impeachment inquiry to include Biden's lies about that money, his scheme to get these hostages out that included this ransom payment scheme for the Iranians, and hold him accountable there. And of course, we also had the problem of Qatar, who is a major funder of Hamas. And we at Judicial Watch have highlighted its enormous financial influence here in the United States. We were engaged in a multi-year legal battle on behalf of a client in Texas as a core legal, I think Legal Institute, that's the name, and Texas A&M. Texas A&M obviously was getting money from the Qatar Foundation, which is essentially the Qatari government. But we couldn't get details on that money. And we had to sue. The Qatar government came in through the foundation and intervened, and the litigation went on for years as we battled this foreign entity to get the truth about its funding for Texas A&M. And lo and behold, we found out why they were so nervous and didn't want the information to come out, because it turned out they gave Texas A&M around $500 million. So Qatar has an outsized influence, and if that's just the tip of the iceberg, I suspect, in terms of its influence operations here in the United States. Now, I know we have a base in Qatar, and there are different views about how useful they are, but there's no doubt they're a terrorist supporting regime. There's just no doubt. And they're major funders of Hamas. The last time I saw, I think the number was $35 million a month in support they were sending over to the Hamas terrorists. So, we not only have, domestic supporters of terrorism, the leftist revolutionary terrorists that are Hamas. I mean, I know there's an Islamic flavor to it, but they're all creatures of the left. Don't let them fool you otherwise. So that's where we stand. I could go on and on about how terrible the terrorism was. And maybe I should go on and on, because already the media is trying to minimize it. I think even the Biden administration has been shocked about the viciousness and has been taken aback about what Hamas did. But nevertheless, the international community is rallying not behind Israel, but against Israel and its right to defend itself. Israel issues a warning to the population of Gaza to get out of town, and the UN says, well, you can't do that. Even the WHO, that corrupt entity, is coming in and attacking Israel. And in these circumstances, when you look at the language, it is a defense of Hamas and an effort to protect Hamas and ensure that it's able to continue to govern in Gaza. I mean, that's the effect of those who say that Israel already is engaging in war crimes as it seeks to defend itself against this unprecedented terrorist attack. I mean, the single greatest loss of Jewish life, it's been said, since the Holocaust. And a terrorist incident like that. And we have Americans who support that type of political violence. And we're seeing them out there today. Today is a day of rage. Hamas called on it. And their supporters are out in full force. They have supporters in the media, apologists in the media, supporters literally supporting them in Congress. When you hear people say, well, both sides, we should pray for the innocents on both sides, obviously no one wants to see an innocent killed. But let's be clear. The reason any innocent is being killed is because of the terrorists. And they would imply Israel is at fault for the innocents being killed. And that's a smear, and it's designed, again, to minimize the terrorism of Hamas. And really to justify left-wing violence. Because I don't think there may be a tactical difference with Hamas. There's no strategic difference. I mean, these are allies. So I don't want to belabor the point. But I've told you that our republic's under attack. And, the same folks who lecture you about equity and indigenous peoples and that we need to reorganize our society, and that we're interlopers here in America who've destroyed indigenous cultures. That's the same thinking that Hamas is promoting when it goes in engaging in genocidal attacks on Israelis. And I tell you, we got to be aware, as Israel is an ally, obviously, of the United States. We have family ties because of the interlocking communities here in the United States. I mean, think of all the Americans who have families in Israel. I mean, that alone, in addition to the strategic ties and the ties we have as an ally. But it shows you how important a secure border is. I mean, Israel, to be clear, I hope there's some internal reckoning as to how that attack was allowed to occur. But it shows you the importance of a secure border. And Israel, obviously that border with Gaza was relatively secure. But you can't have a secure enough border if you're trying to protect your citizens, right? And compare and contrast our border with, frankly, any other national border in the world. It's a joke. Judicial Watch just had a Corruption Chronicles piece. I think they let in 2.1 million people, 2.2 million people at least. And of those, only 1% or so, less than 1%, maybe 0.3%. I forget what the number was. I think it was 99.7 have been allowed to stay. And we've highlighted how aliens of special interest, right? Special interest aliens, which are aliens that we have information to suggest are tied to terrorist entities. The numbers are increasing. There's no doubt. And those are the ones we're catching. So I hope it reminds us the importance of having a secure border. I mean, what struck me about the Israel situation is just how tenuous Israel's security is. Because I saw what happened last Saturday and thought, that's how they lose their country. I mean, they have enough invaders from Gaza or from the north, Hezbollah, another Iranian-backed entity, or other enemies, sweep into their land. Who knows how the country ends up? So these are Israel's nation's on the line here in terms of taking care of this issue. And the left, of course, doesn't want strength, opposes strength in the face of this revolutionary assault. So I just want you to see through it all. Don't buy into the both sides do it, because both sides don't do it. And certainly in this situation, it's obviously what Israel is doing is clearly modest in what I would think is a modest effort at self-defense, even given the circumstances. I mean, they're to be commended for their restraint. So pray for Israel, pray for peace, but pray for a just peace, not the fake peace that the left wants to impose. As far as the left is concerned, there's only peace when they win, right? But we can't let those revolutionaries win and destroy Israel. And because you can bet America is as much as on that agenda for destruction as Israel is. That's my view. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.